Casey Barnes with the song Never Give Up on a Good Time. And welcome back to the Country Viewpoint here on your colour of Country Life Flow FM. And make sure you're looking out for Casey Barnes on the Flow airwaves over the next few days. Well, it's time to talk about the dangers of snakes popping up in places you might not expect to encounter one. And joining me on the line now, off the back of having covered this topic from a Victorian lens recently, we've got the Murraylands snake catcher, David Dique, joining me on the line. Lovely to be with you, David. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Alice. Yeah.
Great to have you join us. Well, the eastern brown, it's been popping up in plenty of parts of regional South Australia, including in some public spaces, I believe, David, in recent times in Murray Bridge. So the dangers of snakes this summer, particularly with a much drier season on the cards, look to be fairly real.
Yeah, I mean, my views, this is purely my views on this. I don't think there's any more snakes about than what there normally is, Alice. It's just that with the weather being as it has, and with the amount of mice that are around at the moment, which is food for the eastern brown, I mean, as soon as you get a warm day, the snakes are going to come out and try and make the most of that with the mice. So consequently, there've probably been more sightings of snakes. The other thing also is where the river was flooded last December and that, where the water's gone down now, snakes are sort of trying to re-establish their territory and that sort of thing, you know. So, yeah, probably more sightings. I wouldn't say there's any more snakes than what it's just that we've seen more of them around.
Okay, well, for whatever reason, I feel like I'm seeing this craze develop around Australia where rather brave people, or perhaps rather sort of risk-taking type individuals, are wanting to manhandle snakes themselves, I guess, for a photo opportunity, for a video type of opportunity. We're seeing it pop up everywhere. It's a lot more prevalent in the eastern states, if I'm honest, in places like Queensland, but people are trying to get up close and personal with snakes. Not a good idea, David.
Absolutely not. I mean, a snake won't attack people. A snake will get defensive. You've got the element who try to be the sort of he-man and macho thing. Snakes, basically, I mean, unless you are trained to work with venomous snakes and know a little bit about them, please leave them alone, because, you know, it's a recipe for a bite. Bearing in mind the eastern brown is the second most toxic land snake in the world. It's not a good idea. I mean, they've got two elements to their venom. One is a neurotoxin, which attacks your nervous system. The other is a hemotoxin, which attacks your blood. It dissolves your red blood cells, and also capillary lining, so you'll end up bleeding out internally. And, I mean, unless you get proper first aid and anti-venom for an effective bite, I think you're pushing your luck a little bit too far.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I'm sure many other people will. Tell us about the state of your work right now. So you're a snake catcher in the Murraylands area. How busy are you?
It depends. Now, yesterday was a cold, windy day. I got a couple of calls and that was it. But, I mean, today has been a sunny day. I haven't had anything as yet, but the temperatures are not exactly brilliant. So, I mean, but it varies. It varies. I mean, sometimes I've had as many as 7 or 8 calls a day. Other times I've had 1. Other times I've had nothing. And, you know, it just depends. It depends on the atmospheric conditions and that, because snakes, they can sense if there's a storm coming or the weather's going to change or whatever. So, I mean, if they think, right, the weather's going to change, they're going to stay in their burrows underground or wherever else they're hiding.
Murrayland snake catcher David Dique. We'll take a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about the dangers of being bitten by a snake when you're out on the farm, for example, with no one around to assist you. That is coming up on the other side of these messages. Don't go anywhere. Sam Fisher with All Right, and welcome back. It's the Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM. It's a Thursday afternoon, and we're speaking with David Dique, who's on the line. He's the Murraylands snake catcher. We're certainly forecasting a pretty hot summer and a dry one too, so people are going to get, in situations where there are snakes around. There's no question about it, particularly out of the city, but you never know, in the city as well at times, from what we're seeing with certain video coverage being posted around the place. So you just never know when you might encounter one. Now, I think it's pretty obvious what people should do when there's a, potential threat around with the snake. But as far as things go for someone who's in an isolated part of the country, and if they're in immediate danger of crossing paths with a snake, or if they're indeed bitten by one, David, what advice would you have for someone in that situation? Because it really is a matter of, time being absolutely essential in that kind of situation. So what should someone do?
Okay, first and foremost, if anyone is living out rural and in an isolated place, I would make sure they were familiar as to what to do with a snake bite. You can get snake bite bandages in various chemists, Terry Whites and so on, and they're not expensive. You're probably talking about $5 or $6 each. Get a couple of those there. Familiarise yourself with what to do if you're bitten by a snake. Now, if you encounter a snake outside in your garden or whatever, my advice would just be leave the creature alone. Okay, if it's not posing a threat to anyone, just leave it alone. It will pass through. If people have got mice running riot in the garden, they've got piles of wood, sheets of tin, hedge clippings, anywhere a snake can hide. If it's got food there and it's got somewhere to hide, it's like breakfast in bed. So my advice would be, to clean up the garden. Get your snake bite kit organised and get familiar with what to do. Keep your garden clean and tidy. Keep your grass short. If you see a snake in there, just leave it alone. It will pass through. If you've got a dog there or kids there, just get them out of the way for a little while. The snake will carry on its merry way. If the snake is actually inside a house, don't mess around with it. Close the door to the room it's in. Preferably wedge something like a towel under the door. Call a licensed, and I emphasise a licensed, snake catcher or the Department of Wildlife.
Yeah, very, very sound advice indeed.
They will remove it safely and relocate it back out where it should be.
Are there situations that can come about where a snake might make a backyard its home? And in that case, what should a family do, particularly if they have pets? Because they often do, particularly young families, David.
Right. If a family's got a snake and it's taken up, shall we say, residence under a concrete slab or whatever, call a licensed snake catcher. Don't take the law into your hands, because it is illegal and carries a hefty fine of $10,000 for killing them and a potential prison sentence. Call a licensed snake catcher or contact the Department of Wildlife.
All right. Now, just looking at your own career, how does one become a snake catcher? How long did you know that you wanted to do this?
Okay. My career as a snake catcher started as a little boy. I was actually in India with my family, and I picked up a snake there. They call it a darmin or rat snake, and fortunately it wasn't a venomous snake. But the feel of the creature moving through my hands and the way it moved, that fascinated me as a child. And it's just something that's been with me all my life, and I still get that same buzz now when I pick up a snake. And now to actually be a snake catcher, you've got to do a course which is safe handling of venomous snakes. You've got to have a police clearance. You've got to do a valid first aid course which covers snake bite. You've got to know a little bit about the species where you're operating.
Well, it's been great interviewing you, David. I really appreciate all the advice you've offered our listeners on the air, and all the best with everything going forward. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Alice. Thank you.
David Dique, the Murraylands snake catcher, joining me in our second hour of the Thursday Country Viewpoint. Plenty more to look forward to on today's show. We're going to take a look at the state of pharmacies in rural and regional Australia during today's third hour. So don't go anywhere. I'll be back with you real soon.